Hello, today we are going to be talking about homeschooling teenagers who were not previously homeschooled, right? Kids who have come out of the system and what some of the challenges you're going to find and how we resolve some of those things with our teenagers, as well as things that teens deal with in general. A lot of it's anecdotal from my own personal experience, but it's something that's been on my mind. So we're going to be talking about that today. Before we get into that, I've got a couple things to share with you. First of all, I'm hosting a free workshop. Put it on your calendars. It's for November 1st at 12 p.m. Mountain Time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. I've just realized that nobody really thinks about Mountain Time. It's like people forget about it. They forget about us in the mountains. Anyway, the workshop is making a magical Christmas, and some simple things that you can do to elevate the Christmas, the whole Christmas season without overcrowding your brain and doing way too much. Because I feel like sometimes we over plan ourselves and then it becomes a stressful season as opposed to a joyous season like it's supposed to be. And so I wanted to share with you the workshop, the things that we do to make a magical Christmas, give you some ideas, some stuff you can implement, and is awesome. That is a free workshop for you. Again, put it on your calendars, November 1st, Mountain Time. And if you're not in the mountains, then it's 11 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. 2 p.m. Eastern Time. The other thing I want to share with you is I started an Etsy store for t-shirts, for homeschooling t-shirts. There are some sweet t-shirts, but mostly they're snarky, because when I wanted to get some homeschooling t-shirts, I found a few that were like, oh, that's cute or clever, but I wanted some snarky ones. Because that's the nature of my personality sometimes, is a little bit impish. So I'm wearing one right now. This is paying homage to my hometown of Austin, Texas. Keep homeschool weird. You can find this one on my shop. Right now, there's only 6 designs up for the t-shirts, but more will be added. I've got a homeschooling heathen coming up for kids and adults. It takes me a little bit of time to upload the designs, and they are print on demand. So I do use a third party to actually print the shirts. They're not being printed at my house because that's way more than my brain can handle. But I did want to get all these ideas that have been living rent free in my head for the last probably year onto t-shirts. So some of them are political, I forewarn you. Anyway, so if you're interested in some homeschool swag, check out A Snarky Homeschool. It's my Etsy shop, and the link. My friends, I am excited to have you back and to talk about teenagers and all that comes with raising teenagers. I have 2 adult children, and then I have currently 2 teenagers, a 17 and 16-year-old. My adult kids are 25, almost 26, and 22, almost 23. And then I have two kids. One's a 12-year-old about to turn 13 in a few months, and then an 8-year-old. And I'm not going to lie, raising teens can be really, really challenging. I'm not going to go into details, but raising my 2 now adult kids was probably one of the biggest and hardest things I've ever done in my entire life. And we dealt with some big stuff, So I'm not going to go into all that we dealt with, but I've learned some really hard lessons raising teenagers. And then you add in the challenge of homeschooling teenagers, and it brings up a whole lot of things. And so I wanted today to talk about, and again, this is purely anecdotal from my own life. You are on tender ground. So I realize that this is a public show, and because it's public, you all can say whatever you want and post whatever review. Like, I get that. But know that during the next few minutes that you've got with me, you're on tender ground. And I'm going to share tender things in my heart as a mother, and not just as somebody who is doing a podcast. So Again, I recognize you can say whatever, you can think whatever. Um, please be respectful because I'm sharing very tender things. As I've mentioned in earlier podcasts, for those that are new to homeschooling, my first about 10 episodes goes into like the beginning of homeschooling and what you need to do and all the laws. And then every episode beyond that has different topics. If you've never listened to my podcast before, just to introduce myself, I've always public schooled my kids. My two oldest graduated from one from a charter school, one from a public high school, although technically charter schools are technically public schools still. But and I dealt with hard things with my boys. We pulled our kids in 2020, in July of 2020, and my next two kids were about to go into high school. My daughter is 12, my son was 13, and they were turning 13 and 14. And so it was hard because I had all these fears about like, how do I homeschool teenagers, right? It doesn't seem as daunting or scary when they're little, because you get to do fun things like go on nature walks and things like that. And it's a little bit more daunting because you have to worry about when they're teenagers, like what about college? What about transcripts? What about all of these things? I've since learned over the 4 years now that Joshua is 17 and technically he's graduated. He has a list of books that I've given him that he has to finish before I'll officially graduate him, because in my state of Colorado, I, as a parent, can legally give him a diploma and graduate him. So I said I'm not going to graduate him until he finishes the books that we agreed that he'd finish reading, which he's plugging along. But it was so terrifying for me, thinking like, what if I really screw up, and how many credits do they need to graduate? And every state's laws are different regarding this. My sister's in Utah, and they're required to declare if the child's diploma seeking or not. And if they are diploma seeking, then they have to fulfill all of these credits and all this stuff. So when I pulled the kids to start homeschooling, like I was really worried about all these things, and we were able to navigate through like, what do we do about transcripts, and what do we do about credits, and what does that look like in my state? And I'm not going to go into all of that. There's lots of resources. I may do a whole episode like on transcripts. If you watch the episode on my wonderful, delightful guest, Campbell Rutherford, who went to Harvard, they talk a little bit more in depth about what they experience with transcripts. And they're back east. But today I wanted to talk about some of the challenges for those of you pulling teens from the public school system to homeschool them. I want to talk about some of the challenges that you might face with your teens and how you can overcome some of those things. My observation has been that those who have always homeschooled their kids, those kids, when they get into their teenage years, are very different than those who are, the experience is very different than those who have always public schooled their kids. This was especially reinforced in my head this summer when, actually it wasn't the summer, it was about a month ago, I went to a homeschooling conference. Now I had never been to a homeschooling conference. I didn't know what to expect. This was a smaller homeschooling conference. But what I found very quickly, my sister came with me. She pulled her two teenage daughters last year. So this is their second year homeschooling, her now teens. Her older kids all went to public school. And she and I observed the same thing as we're listening to all the speakers. And it was wonderful. It was a delightful conference. It was all women. Men were not allowed to come. It was a beautiful experience and conference, but our observation, both she and I observed this, is that a lot of them, these moms that we talked to, and a lot of the speakers would say things like, well, my child, wanted to experience public school and wanted to go to a public high school. And we'd hear a lot of young moms say, well, I think, I might put them in high school. And I hear this a lot where homeschooling families who are long-term homeschoolers will say, well, I really, my kids really want to experience school, so I think I'll put them in high school. And the kids really want to, feel the high school experience. But for those of us whose kids have been in the system, and you talk to public school kids and you ask them how they feel about school, my experience working with families and with my own family is those kids will say, don't ever send me back, please. I work with a lot of families leaving the system. That's what I know. I'm not a long-time homeschooler. I'm 4 years in. And I'm different than other podcasters out there who would, they're third generational homeschoolers or whatnot. I pulled my kids right before high school, right? And so when you talk to my teenage kids, they'll tell you, please don't ever send me back. And they didn't necessarily have a negative experience. Now, I've had negative experiences with public school system. Don't get me wrong. I also taught in it. So I know this system really well. But when you ask high schoolers in public school, how do you feel about school? The response is usually like, I hate school. I love to learn, but I hate school. I'm tired. I feel like I'm wasting my time. I feel like I'm not seen. I feel like I'm not heard. And then you have kids who are legitimately traumatized, that have gone through years of emotional abuse, whether it be at the hand of their peers or at the hand of even teachers or administrators who say things and do things that are painful and rude and mean. And then the justification is, well, these kids need to learn at a young age how to buck up, how to be strong. Yet in the workplace, if you experience that stuff, you could quit, but these kids can't, right? And so there's a lot of trauma and abuse that happens, and it frosts my cookies when I hear people justify it like it's acceptable for their kids to be emotionally abused in a situation day in and day out and bullied and whatnot. And so some of these kids are coming out during high school, middle school, even elementary school, with severe trauma and dealing with past abuse. And that's what it is. It is abuse, what some of these kids experience. So it's interesting because when you talk to teenagers, and again, I've worked with teenagers for a long time in various capacities. While I was in college, I was working with teenagers as a youth counselor. And then I became a middle school teacher. I continued to work with youth at church. I was like working with teenagers a lot, whether it be in Sunday school or doing different things with youth. So I know how you think, and they're smart. So some of the things that I've heard from youth, and I'll just, again, a lot of this is anecdotal. I was working with a family in January and I talked to their teenage son. Now you have to understand, this is a kid at his school that was really, really popular. He's adorable and he's a sweet kid, and he's actually he's like a sweet, good kid. He wasn't a bully. But there were some concerns about what was going on at school, and he wanted to play. He was very good at his particular sport, but the coaches would say things like, for varsity, they'd say, well, this is only a game, and so we want everyone to be able to play. except for this child was hoping to get a scholarship. And if they play everybody all of the time, then those that are looking to get scholarships wouldn't. So there was all these nepotism and political things going on in that school. And I'm aware of the school and I'm aware of the coaches. And it's like common knowledge in this particular school that there's a lot of nepotism with the coaches. And so his parents contacted me and said, hey, we're thinking about homeschooling. What would that look like with sports? And how would this work? Now, again, every state is different. He was being withdrawn in the middle of his sophomore year. And so as I sat down with them, I asked him his thoughts on public school, and he's like, it's fine. I'm like, no, don't lie to me. How are you honestly feeling about school? And he said, I'm tired. I said, yeah. And he's like, I feel like I waste a lot of my time. I'm a good student. I get good grades, but I feel like I have to take classes that I don't really need or want to take. And I really would love to be practicing my sport more. It's fine. School is fine. He's like, I love seeing my friends, but I only see them at lunch and in some classes and then after school. But I'm tired and I'm frustrated with sports and everything. And so we talked for a couple hours, his parents, him, and me. And they said, what would it take? And I said, well, I'm not an attorney, but here are I can show you the state laws. They determined where they would want to in our state and in most states, there is a governing body in the public school system over sports and extracurricular activities. So they had to contact that governing body. In my state, it's CHASA. In Texas, it's the University Interscholastic League, or UIL. You have to find out in your state. In many states, homeschooling kids are legally allowed to participate in public school sports. That's not every state, but it is a lot of I would say most of the states. And so one of the things that we had to navigate in my state, you can submit your notice of intent to homeschool to whatever school district you so choose. That may not be the case in your state. But that was one of the issues the dilemmas that we came up with was, okay, so we submitted it to the school that he wanted to play for, to that school district. He went to the school district. They said, we want to homeschool. We're pulling him in the middle of the semester. And then there was logistical problems such as, well, you're withdrawing him, but he played, JV and varsity as a sophomore. So he, per our rules, per CHASA's rules, he's got 180 days or whatever, 365 days before he could play varsity for the other school, blah, blah, blah. The school district was actually really great to work with. They said, you don't have to submit any curriculums to us by state law. The administrator in charge of that understood that, knew that. But then dealing with the governing sports body was a different story because they wanted they wanted extra stuff. And the family didn't want to get in, they didn't want to get an attorney and get into legal things. So they jumped through the hoops that CHASA required. Right. And so he was able to transfer to this other school to play sports for them. And then they submitted what they needed to as far as what they were going to do for curriculums. And I put that in air quotes because they did get creative with some of the things. Like he wanted to read all these business books. And we talked about, well, that can be a curriculum in and of itself. And that would be a business credit or a business class. And he also was worried. He said, well, what if I want to go back and go back into the public school? He goes, I don't want to go back because I like the academics. But if I were to go back, it would be for camaraderie with my friends, and to get to know the team a little bit better, And so we had to think about all of those pieces, right? And so that's one thing that we worked through is if you are dealing with you want to pull your child, but they still want to play sports or do band or orchestra or whatever, and your state allows that, look at what pieces you're going to need to do to satisfy that. and then create their curriculums if you're using curriculums accordingly. One of the other dilemmas, so that's the first dilemma, is you might have to jump through a lot of hoops if there is a governing body over sports and extracurricular activities and your child wants to continue to play. Another dilemma that I often see is with teenagers being pulled is that there is not a lot of time to deschool them. The rule is, for every year that they've been in public school, it's 1 month of deschooling. Well, if you've had a child who's a junior in high school or a senior in high school or a sophomore in high school, there's not a lot of time to deschool. And they have a much harder time deschooling, just like you will or have, than say a fifth grader or a first grader or a second grader. In many cases, these kids are so tired and they just want to be done. And so you as a parent are going to have to navigate that with them. Now, is it acceptable to grossly simplify things and shorten things? 100%, right? It's acceptable for them to get their work done in a couple hours. That's totally fine. And in your state, they might require you to take certain classes, or require you to have certain credits. Just remember, it doesn't take as long when you're homeschooling and it's one-on-one tutoring, or they're learning at their pace. They can do things much, much faster. And they can have jobs and work around those jobs and things like that. So, but anticipate that your ability to deschool, where you're doing very, very little, like reading, writing, math, and that's all you're doing, there might be some challenges there because per your state requirements, you might be required that they, as teenagers, have to do extra things. And so you're going to have to work around that. But remember, the schoolwork does not have to take 8 hours or 7 hours. So keep that in mind, that your ability to deschool will not be, you're not going to have as much time to deschool these kids because they're getting ready to leave the house. Like they're getting ready to move on. And mentally, they go through some mental gymnastics. And as a parent, not only you're going through the mental gymnastics, right? I experienced that where I was like, whoa, no, school has to look like this. They are also going through with it because their brains are more developed than a first grader. And so be very, very sensitive to them emotionally as they're shifting. Now, if you've got kids who were teased or bullied or who had no friends, they may need professional help. And I say that in all seriousness because I hear it again and again and again and again and again. That these kids who are bullied, they're like, what do we do? And the school, because the school's not going to do anything, right? They're already at capacity. They're already at their max of what they're capable of doing. And pulling the kids out of the system, number one, there's a lot of mental gymnastics that they're doing, thinking now I'm weird because I'm a homeschooler. But number two, I want to homeschool. Like I hear this a lot, like they want to homeschool, but yet they feel confused because they don't want to be a weird homeschooler and there's a stigma to it and still. And so as a parent, be very gentle with them as they work through these things. If there was bullying, you may need to get them some professional help, not necessarily, but keep that in mind that there may be some hard things. The other thing I've noticed is a lot of times these kids will come out of the system. They're not going to know what their passions are. Like they'll know that like I like this sport because that's what I've always done. I've always played soccer, or I play trombone, so I love trombone. But mentally, these teenagers are so tired, and they haven't had time to think about the things that interest them. And as a parent, it is your job to walk with them and be with them, and be patient with them as they try to figure out what they want next. They may want to take a break from going to college. They may want to, that those first few months, they may want to sleep a lot because as I've discussed before, the kids in the school system are very sleep deprived, right? There are studies all over the place talking about it, how sleep deprived kids and teens are. So your teen may want to sleep a lot, and guess what? It's okay. Let them sleep, especially those first few months. They're going to be tired. And again, there's all these mental gymnastics that are going on inside, and then their physical bodies are so tired. Those are some of the things that we worried about. I worried about credits and things like that. I don't worry about credits so much anymore. In most states, you can do concurrent enrollment. If they're interested in that college path, they can take college classes as homeschoolers. I don't know about every state, but I know in most states they can. So look into your state laws regarding that. My daughter, Katie's 16. She's decided that she does want to go back to community college, state college. It's a state college now. And so in the winter, she's going to start classes again and do a couple classes, get some credits for the state college. And so that might be a consideration for you, as you're like, well, let's pull you and you can do concurrent enrollment at the same time, and it actually counts towards something. But be patient with them, and which is where I want to lead into this. Those are the top things that I hear, like from parents. And again, I work with a lot of parents pulling their kids in secondary grades. I want to talk about tough, when things are tough relationship wise with your kids. Now, I wish I could say that I have always have had an amazing relationship with all my kids, but that would be a lie. Especially with my oldest two kids, it was really tough, and I was really hard on them, and they had their own things that they dealt with, and I wasn't always full of grace. I raised them. They're my stepsons, but I raised them. Their biological mom was not in the picture. And I've learned the hard way that kids need grace. And sometimes when they would do dumb things as teenagers, I was really harsh. My mom would tell me, Janae, don't shoot a sparrow with a cannon. And I didn't understand what that meant. And there was times that I felt a great deal of resentment towards them and thought, they, all this stuff. But you have to keep in mind that they're still kids. They still have undeveloped prefrontal cortexes. They won't be developed until they're about 24. They yearn for certain things. And so let's talk about that. I want to talk about how you reestablish a relationship with the kids that you don't necessarily have a good relationship with. Again, this is anecdotal and from personal experience and hard experience. And then as well as things that Joshua, my 17-year-old, and I sat down on Saturday and discussed together. And he shared some hard things with me, because actually Joshua and I have a very good relationship, but he even shared some hard things with me that he's like, Mom, I want you to hear me. And it's, and we were talking about this podcast, right? So, so the first thing, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Arbinger Institute, but it's an organization. They've written books, The Anatomy of Peace, Leadership and Self-Deception. They work with world leaders. They work with all sorts of organizations. They work with the Anasazi Foundation out of Arizona, which is a wilderness, it's a wilderness program for troubled teens and adults. It's probably the longest wilderness program that's out there. It's a remarkable institution. One of the things that they discuss is that in every child, there is a seed of greatness. And when you have a difficult child, sometimes it's really, really hard to see that greatness in them. It's hard to see those seeds. But as you start homeschooling your teens, the first thing I want you to do is write them a letter telling them all the beautiful things that you see about them. Tell them about their seeds of greatness. And for some of you, it will be hard because the relationship is rocky. And don't say anything negative. Don't say, if you had only done that. No, this is a letter of encouragement to let them know that you love them, that you see them, that you see their goodness and you see their potential, that you see them. Okay, so that's the first thing that you need to do is write them a letter. At the Anasazi Foundation, they call it the Seed of Greatness letter. Okay, so that's the first thing I want you to do. And even if you don't have a rocky relationship, by golly, write them a letter letting them know you love them. And by the way, so my kids go to a church camp every summer, and every summer they have us write parent letters about all the things. Essentially, they have us write a Seed of Greatness letter. And Katie and Joshua are such great teenagers. They are so fun and so sweet and loving and kind and all the things. And every year I write them their little Seed of Greatness letter for their camps. And it's interesting because when I go in their rooms, like they hold those letters dear. They hold those letters holy. They're holy to those kids. They need to hear from us the things that we see in them. Because what we think, despite how they act, what we think matters to them. Have you ever talked to an adult who is 45 and they still yearn for approval from their parents? My friends, it never ends. Like it doesn't. Like the parent relationship, like it's the whole life. And so if you and I can make that relationship strong now, they won't end up in as much therapy when they're older. Okay. I've joked about that. Like I've saved up not for college for my children, but for when they'll need therapy, because they'll probably need therapy. So I want you to write them a Seed of Greatness letter, telling them all the great things that you see about them now, the things about you that you love about them, what you felt when they came into your life, whether they were born to you or you received them as a foster child or you adopted them or they're your stepchild. It doesn't matter. Share with them the things that you love, that you're grateful for, and how you feel about them. Again, even if you have hard feelings right now, let those feelings go for a little bit and dig deep and share with them what you love about them. There are 3 things that all teenagers need. They need to feel like they're competent. They need to feel like they belong, and they need to feel autonomy. So I want to go through all these things. And I apologize that this is a little discombobulated. I tried so hard to organize it, and I just felt like I just got to speak from the heart. Teenagers need to be allowed to fail. That's one thing we don't get in the system. They get a bad grade, they move on. And sometimes teachers will say, well, you could do makeup credit and then we're going to move on. Failure is really not allowed in our system, which is problematic. Now, it can be allowed in homeschooling. As I've mentioned before, I don't do grades with my kids. I don't, like, for transcript purposes, I put on grades, but I want to see kids master stuff. And if they fall on their face over and over and over again doing something, it's okay. Right. But I don't put them down about their failures. I try really hard not to, because I want them to embrace the failure, because that's where we learn. We learn through our failures. I learned to be a better parent because I failed so many times, and have been a crappy parent. And it's been through those crappy experiences that I've learned the most and learned the hard way. I was chuckling. I was on Facebook. And I really have got to get off Facebook. But I was on Facebook. I was on a homeschooling page. It wasn't the school to homeschool page. I love the families in there because they're so generous and kind and loving and supportive. But I was on another one, not so much. Somebody asked a question. They simply said, I think we don't celebrate Halloween, but I do want to watch a YouTube video with my kids on like the origins of Halloween. Oh my gosh. You would have thought they put something totally political on there. And there was 100 comments, and there was like 10 moms who kept writing the ugliest, meanest responses to this poor mom. Oh, and the other thing they posted in the post was like, I don't want to hear everyone's personal opinions about Halloween. I just want to know what's a good YouTube video to share the history and the origins of Halloween. That's it. Oh no. There was people bashing people who believed in the Bible. There was people bashing pagans. It was so ugly. And I was so disgusted at our lack of civil discourse. I did not make any comments because I'm like, I just can't. I did look up the people, though, who were the meanest. And lo and behold, they were these young moms with young kids. I thought, isn't that fascinating? Here, these very inexperienced moms are going to learn the hard way. Civil discourse. They're going to learn the hard way. They were saying, you're going to screw up your kids and you're going to do this and this is how I do things. But yet they have no life experience to know how things are going to turn out. And by the way, we don't get to pick how our kids turn out. They do. They pick, not us. So then I was on a different Facebook page, and it wasn't the same question, but it was along the same lines. I'm struggling with this. And by the way, in this other Facebook page, it was more older parents who have teenagers, who have adult children. And this other Facebook page, it was totally a different story. This mom said, this is what I'm struggling with. And this one parent, responded, oh, mama, it's so hard. You got this. This is some of the hard lessons that we've learned. Da-da-da. Another one, oh, mama, man, I remember dealing with that with one of my kids. Da-da-da-da. Oh, mama, you are doing better than you think you are. I remember this hard thing that I learned, and I wish I had done it differently. And I looked again at the responses, and I looked at the profiles of these women and some men, all older parents who had been through and done life and learned from hard failures, and far less judgmental. As a matter of fact, there was no judgment. I mean, it was like, I feel you. I hear you. We learned from our mistakes. Our kids need to be allowed to learn from their mistakes. They need to be allowed to let natural consequences take over. I'm not saying don't have consequences for your kids with dumb stuff, because yeah, you should. Joshua, he goes to a religious class in the mornings, and his teacher called me and said, he's been speeding out of the parking lot and some of the other business owners are concerned. Well, I told Joshua, I said, give me your keys for a week, and we live close enough. It's only 1.5 miles, 2 miles away. You're going to walk this week to that class and from that class. Your sister will be driving with me. You will be walking, right? He had to have a consequence. And we talked about, like, if this is a big deal, that, right? So give consequences, give natural consequences, but don't shoot the sparrows with a cannon. Okay, that's the first thing. Our kids long to fit in, and they long to fit in with us. They long to be seen by us. They might fight. They might tell you that they don't. They might think you're a dork, but they long to fit in with you. Another dilemma that you're going to see coming into high school, homeschooling and high schooling, is if they didn't have many public school friends, finding a homeschooling group is going to be challenging, and it might take some time. Keep trying to find groups that that work. We've been to so many different groups where my kids were like, these are not our people. And other groups where they're like, oh yeah, but they're really far away, And so it's a challenge to help your teens find friends and groups that they fit in with. And it might be that they find some through orchestra or theater or a community sports team or the public school, but help them facilitate that. Take them to different places so that they can try to make some new friends. Because again, there's that need for belonging, that we want to belong. Number one, they have to belong with you. They have to feel like they matter to you and they belong with you. Number two, they have to feel like they have a little community of their own. They long for connection. I recently saw an Instagram short where the guy said the opposite of addiction is connection, that people feel emotionally disconnected. Now, it resonated with me because it's true. Like, as human beings, as people, we crave connection. As a parent, that connection needs to happen with you first. Now, I do understand as they get older, and this is something that my kids' therapist used to talk to us about with my older kids, is she said as they get older, they want autonomy, but there's this kind of crazy dance that we do with these kids because they want autonomy, but yet they still are kids and they still want us to see them and love them. They need connection with us. Now, some of the hard things that Joshua shared with me this weekend is he said, Mom, sometimes it's not kids don't go to talk to their friends to get advice. That's what he said. He said, kids go to talk to their friends to be heard and not shot down. And this is what was painful, is like, sometimes I feel like when I come to talk to you and Dad about some of my zany, crazy ideas, you and Dad are like, no, that's a stupid idea. And here I'm an unschooler, and he's sharing this with me on Saturday. Again, he said this is all okay to share on the podcast. And he said, I just want you to hear me and just encourage me and be like, okay, try the thing. It was, and he said, he's like, not when I do stupid stuff, like not stuff that would harm me or stuff that would harm another person. He said, I just want I want you to hear without putting down my ideas. I cannot emphasize enough that they want to be heard. They want to know that what they think is important and it matters. Julie Bogart, who is the author of The Brave Learner, and she created the Brave Writer curriculum for reading and writing, talks about this, that like when kids are young or when teenager, when they're little or whatever, when you hear them say something clever or something beautiful, write it down and then share it with them, because they want to be, they want to know that their thoughts matter. And by doing that, you show that their thoughts matter. The other thing is, they need their buckets filled. This is the other thing. Joshua said, I have an emotional bank account and I need you to fill the emotional bank account more and better. And he said, could you catch me doing good more than you catch me doing wrong? And I said, yeah, I can. I'm so sorry that I haven't been catching you doing good. He's like, Mom, I'm a good kid. And I'm like, you are a good kid. He is kind and he sees people. He sees the needs in people and then he meets those needs. He's remarkable in that. In some ways, he's like an 80-year-old man in a 17-year-old body. And he said, I need you to catch me doing good. He's like, positive reinforcement goes a long way. And I started when he said that, and I had to chuckle because when I was 17, I remember my mom said to me, Dad never brings me flowers. And I wish he'd bring me flowers. And I said to my dad, why don't you ever bring Mom flowers? And he said, because when I bring them to her, she just puts them aside and then says thanks and then that's it. And he said, she doesn't really acknowledge that I brought them. It's not important to her. So I said, Dad, just this once, would you bring her flowers tonight? He's like, I suppose I could do this. I suppose so. So I told my mom, I said, Mom, Dad feels dismissed even when he brings you flowers. So if he brings you flowers this week, can you make a big deal about it? Like, can you really more than once, like throughout the day and the next day and the next day, really make a big deal about, oh my gosh, these are the most beautiful flowers and they're so lovely, and how thoughtful that you brought me flowers, right? He needs the positive reinforcement, right? I'm a 17-year-old. I recognize that. They recognize it. So she did. He brought her flowers that night. I was like, wow, Dad, he heard me. Wow, thanks for hearing me, Dad. My parents were actually really good about listening and reinforcing. And my mom did what I asked her to do and started just, oh my gosh, these are so beautiful. And how did I get so lucky to have such a loving husband? And oh, I've got to put them where everyone can see them. And every time we get home, and did you see the flowers that Dad brought me? They're so beautiful. And she was sincere about it. Like, I'm like, you have got to be sincere, not snarky. She's like, no, I'll be sincere. So she just gushed over these flowers. You want to know what happened? 2 days pass. She's still gushing over the flowers. My dad comes home from work. What does he come home from work with? More flowers. I kid you not. It made me laugh. I'm like, Dad. He's like, she loved them. You were right. She loved them. She loved them. I need to bring her more. I'm like, Dad, you could spread it out a little bit. Like, these flowers aren't even dead yet. Like, they're still real. Like, it's been 2 days, right? It was adorable. And I should have learned as a 17-year-old back then that lesson that people need. It doesn't matter if they're teens or kids or adults. They need positive reinforcement. My mom would say that, though. She'd say people need more attaboys than crap. Our kids are no different. We've got to catch them doing good. You want to know what really affects kids? Affects us as adults too, is when they hear us speaking about them to somebody else. And it can either devastate them because we're speaking ill of them, which I would not suggest doing, or it reinforces our love for them when they catch us and they hear us and they don't know, they think that we don't know, like that they're listening, and they hear us praising them and saying marvelous things about them and why we love them and why we think they're remarkable. They listen. They're eavesdroppers, and they want to know what we're saying about them, whether we're on the phone or to our spouse or to a neighbor or to a friend. If they can catch us speaking beautifully about them, it helps the relationship. If we're speaking ill, it will destroy a relationship really fast. So hold our tongues for the bad. Give them a lot of attaboys to their faces and then to other people where they can hear. Okay. They want to know that they have value. They long to share with us their thoughts. We just saw The Wild Robot on Wednesday, and Katie went with us because she read it with us. And as we got in the car, I was like, what'd you think? And she had all sorts of wonderful things to say, comparing and contrasting the book, character development, like all these beautiful things that, like, as not only as a mom, but as an educator, I'm like, oh, right. And I just listened and listened and listened and listened. And we had a marvelous conversation. They want to know that their thoughts matter. Yesterday, she was talking my ear off about, she wants to do a very elaborate Halloween costume. She wants me to make a very elaborate Halloween costume. My degree was costume design. And so once a year, I get to use my degree. And so she's like, Mom, I'm so sorry for talking your ear off about this. I'm like, please don't ever apologize, baby girl. Like, I love to hear what you have to say. And they want our full attention. They don't want us to be listening with our AirPods in. They don't want us to have to be looking at Instagram or YouTube, which means you and I have got to put our phone down when it's time for them to talk to us, because they notice they know that we're not truly listening if we've got our phone in hand. So put our phone down and listen and praise. Be full of wonder and curiosity about their thoughts. Give them autonomy. Give them real responsibility. When Andrew Purwa came on the program, he brought that up. He said, it's funny because in schools, a lot of times they give arbitrary work, and the kids, the teenagers, are not stupid, and they know it's just busy work, right? They yearn for real. They yearn for autonomy. Joshua wants, he's right now helping a couple YouTubers edit shorts and do some filming for them. And he loves the actual responsibility, that it's for real, that it's not fake, that it's not pretend, like it is for real, like it's an adult thing that he is doing. He loves it. He eats it up. Our teenagers want legitimate responsibility. Several years ago, we were opening our new real estate office, and we had several hundred people who were invited to this big event, and we had ice sculptures and we had all this catering, all this stuff. Well, we needed somebody to serve the drinks. Now, we were not serving alcohol at all. But we did need somebody to pick up cups and fill the Sprites and whatever sodas the people were getting. So I asked some kids from church if they'd be willing. They were 16, 17. Now, one of the kids was a little bit of a punk to his mom. I know, because his mom and I were really close friends. And she's like, I don't know how he'd do for you. Whenever I ask him to do anything, he doesn't do anything. He's a pain in the butt. But I asked him if he'd be willing to do this. I told the kids what they need to wear. There was 3 or 4 of them. I'm like, this is what you need to wear. Here's your responsibility. Y'all, they were amazing. I was like, these are professionals from throughout the city. So they were awesome. So as we're cleaning up and everyone is gone, I asked them, I'm like, how did you like that? And they worked so hard. They did an awesome job. As a matter of fact, people asked them, can we, do they hire out? And I'm like, they're not old enough to sell alcohol. So if you're serving alcohol, they can't do that. But they could, other things, but they're great kids. Anyway, so I asked the boy, especially the punk kid. And I said, what'd you think? He's like, that was the coolest thing I've ever experienced. I'm like, how come? And he was super excited. And he's a kid that doesn't talk a lot, but he's like they were real adults. They were business people. I'm like, yeah. And there was a couple hundred people that came. And he's like, I felt like an adult, and it felt awesome. And I was like, well, people said that you did amazing. He's like, I know, they gave us tips. And I'm like, woohoo, right? Which I told him if anyone gave him tips, that would be fine with me. So they loved it. Our teenagers want real responsibility, not, pardon my language, not BS stuff. They want real responsibility. They want real autonomy. They want to be responsible over how they work with their day. They don't need us to micromanage them. They don't. They want to take control and go, yes, I want to work out because I want to. I want to do this because I am choosing to do it. Just like in a job situation where employees don't want to be micromanaged, our teenagers are no different. They want autonomy because it matters. Our job is to grow them into responsible, wonderful adults. But if we never allow them autonomy over anything, how will they ever learn? Because they're not learning it in the public school system. You know why they're not? Because they're told perpetually what to do. They turn in their stuff, but they are always doing what somebody else tells them to do. So as homeschooling parents, if we can give them more autonomy over their choices, over what they study and things like that, it helps them become the adults that they are meant to be. And it helps the relationship that they have with you and I, because they see that we trust them. Now, I understand that there are kids who do stupid stuff it's hard to give them trust, right? And sometimes I have to build back trust because they've screwed up in big ways, in big, huge adult ways, right? So as much as we can give them autonomy with where they're at, the better. I've said they long to be seen, they long to be heard. They long to not be lectured to all the time. Again, it's that I see you doing well, I hear you, I respect your opinion. If you have a relationship that's rocky, it's going to take time to get their hearts back. It's going to take time to build a relationship. Again, I say this as a person who knows, who has screwed up already in my life, and who worked so hard to build back relationships that I helped destroy. So as you're homeschooling these beautiful teenagers, remember that they are beautiful and they need you. They need you more than they need anybody else, and they need you to be there to lend a listening ear without criticism, without judgment, with love, with seeing them for who they truly are, which is somebody with a seed of greatness inside. You're going to get their hearts back, and you're going to help them go into adulthood. Now, again, I can't tell you about all the laws in all the states because I'm not in every state. So follow the laws and help them along. Again, remember, they don't need to study as much as they do in school. But if you can let them know that you hear them, you see them, you're not judging them, you give them autonomy, you give them positive reinforcement, you let them know that you still see the seed of greatness in them, that you're that listening ear to hear, they will start to come to you first before they go to any of their friends. And you will get their hearts back. And then you can establish a relationship that will last throughout their lifetime, where they may not need as much therapy when they're adults. With that, my friends, go love on your teens. They need you. They need you more than anybody else. You got this. We'll talk next week. If you enjoyed this today, please like and subscribe. You could also join our private Facebook group at School to Homeschool, or sign up for our newsletter at www.schooltohomeschool. Have a great day.